Excited to introduce Nathan Moore, who has been in the financial services industry for quite some time, has a wealth of knowledge and experience that he's going to drop some great gems on you all today. So feel free to, reach out to him, talk to him, ask those questions. Don't be shy. And Nathan, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just fire up this presentation here. All right, give thumbs up if you can see it there. Okay, great. No, so thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to partner up with all of you, and I'm glad that I get to kick this off because I'm not following anybody, so now I'm the standard. So it's always a great place to start. But today I want to put the 101 in navigating some do's and don'ts of wealth building. I don't want to be overwhelming with the information. I want to create a foundation that you can build your personal wealth journey on top of. And so most of what I'm going to share today is going to be extremely basic. And you got to understand that for something that seems basic to you, it might seem advanced to the others. And so if you have specific questions, let's save that for the Q&A. But I do want to make sure that you all can walk away with at least one new foundational idea that you hadn't heard of yet and you want to apply to your life. Speaking of life, I'm too pretty to be in prison for life, so I got to show this slide, which the regulators require. But I do want to say I'm grateful to MFS Mutual Fund Company for providing the content for this presentation. And I'm grateful to my broker-dealer, Plan Member Securities, for allowing me to share this information with you today. So we talk about the groundwork. What do we mean by the groundwork? Every single financial decision we make when it comes to building our wealth has a purpose behind it. And that purpose rarely has anything to do with the dollars themselves. That purpose has to do with our financial why. And as I like to introduce myself, I like to introduce myself by showing my wealth why. When I work to invest, when I work to save, rarely ever is it because I'm looking for a specific balance in that account. I'm actually doing this because I want to take care of my daughter. I want to take care of my son, my family, my grandchildren. I'm looking for opportunities to expand my wealth so that way I can provide them with the life that they're looking for to make sure that they have the opportunity to continue that legacy. So as you're thinking about your own personal wealth journey, you want to make sure you're starting with the foundation of why. Why are you wanting to start saving? Why are you wanting to start investing? Why are you wanting to get out of debt? And when you know what that target is or that reason is, it's going to make it a lot more easy to stay consistent with your journey. Now, I always have to let people know I got 3 kids, 4 grandkids, but my favorite child is my fur baby Diamond. So, I can say that I'm not lying, but this is my favorite kid and everybody knows. And if you notice on one of the previous slides, it says I like to travel. And I do want to just share this here. My family and I went to Spain a couple of summers ago, and my son, a 70-year-old, convinced me to allow him to try all of the fast food restaurants in Spain to see if they were the same as the ones in the United States. And so we walk into Burger King and we see this picture is the first thing we see in the middle of Spain. And naturally, being the goofballs that we are, we had to recreate this photo. So this is one of my favorite wealth why moments, is it allowed me to take my children and family across the world to have this experience. Now, when we think about building wealth, we want to remind ourselves that it's not a short journey, it's a lifelong journey. Slow and steady builds the wealth. Slow and steady wins the race. So when we build our wealth, we want to look at it essentially 4 equal parts. We start the path to building our wealth. That's generally phase 1. Once we're finishing with high school or we're finishing with college and we're getting into our career. Then we move into phase 2, which is getting ready to retire. And that's where we're accumulating our assets to live on. We're getting our documents together. We're getting our affairs in order. Stage 3, which is often considered the finish line, but is actually the beginning line for that stage, is actually living in retirement. We oftentimes forget we will spend just as much time living in retirement as we spend accumulating our wealth to get to retirement. And then phase 4 is creating that legacy to make sure that your financial acumen lives beyond yourself. So when we talk about the fundamentals of wealth, we're looking at just simple 3 things. 1, spend less than you earn. 2, invest based on your goals. And then 3, stay the course. If you put A plus B plus C together, you now have your lifetime of wealth building. So let's look at what this looks like in real life. Starting on the path, number 1, keep a budget. You got to know what's coming in and you got to know what's going out. So when we think about our income and our expenses, oftentimes we feel like we don't make enough money. But the reality is, very few people have a crisis of income. Most of us have a crisis of expenses, meaning that we allow our expenses to get out of check or get out of order. So when you think about your budget is simply this rule of 50, 30, 20. 50% of your household budget should go to your basic needs, housing, rent, food, transportation, etc. What does it take for you to have shelter and well-being? 30% of your budget can go to your wants and wishes. That's dining out, shopping, traveling, doing the things you're working hard, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You want to be able to enjoy that. So carve out about 30 cents of the dollar for that. And then at least 20 cents or 20% of your budget should be going to saving for your future, for your retirement, your savings fund, your emergency fund. We oftentimes are running from a budget because we don't want to face the monster. And it's like when we're kids, we think there's the monster under the bed. And it's only when we look under there and realize it's just a pile of dirty clothes that we're no longer intimidated. So budgeting is that very same concept. Face the monster so you're no longer intimidated by it. Part of budgeting is utilizing credit. Credit should be a tool that you can leverage to accumulate the things you want to accomplish and the things you want to receive. Now, do not let credit become a torture device to you or an anchor to hold you back. When the right credit score, it allows you to have access to capital that's usually at a lower cost or more favorable terms. It allows you to have time to float it. So make sure you're managing your credit. Here are a few ways to understand the breakdown of your credit score. And keep this in mind when you're making decisions of opening a new credit card or closing a credit card, or which credit do you apply for. A lot of people that get in trouble financially, I just have two simple tips when it comes to credit card management. Number one, if you're concerned about taking care of it, set it up for auto pay. And then number two, the banks love to give you more than you need to spend. It's okay to call up and ask your credit card issuer to reduce your limit. For about 10 years, I had a $500 limit on a credit card. I had to institute that myself because at one point in 2007, I had over $400,000 worth of credit card and credit line debts trying to run several businesses and using them to keep it afloat. And it was just not manageable, but I saw the value of it. So I just said, hey, lower this limit to $500. And sometimes I would pay that off 2, 3, 4 times in a week to continue using it. So use it properly. When it comes to saving, make sure you understand the power of compounding. Money left alone in a long-term investment could compound as the years pass. I put this chart up here, and I'm not going to go in depth in this, but I really want to show that when you think about your savings and you think about your spending, do not think about solely what things cost today. Think about what you are taking out of your future portfolio. I recently got a new iPhone. And I only got it because they made an offer to me to turn in my old one and get a free one. But I use this as an example because the typical cell phone costs $1,000. Well, that $1,000 cell phone will equal about $15,000 to $20,000 out of my retirement if I buy the phone versus setting in here and allowing it to compound over the years. Now, if I need the phone, I got to spend the money. Understandable. But do I need a new one every single year? So when you think about the power of compounding, when it's time to now look at spending discretionally, you're going to start thinking about, hey, is that really worth it? I'm going to take this cruise. The cruise is going to cost $10,000. No, the cruise is actually going to cost you $100,000 out of your future retirement. Is it worth it? It might be, but now you're making an informed decision. So do not forget the power of compounding. And one of the things I always have to remind people of is start investing early. Now I'm 49. I may say, well, it's too late. I can't do it at 18. Well, the best time to start is yesterday. The second best time is today. So starting early just means start now and create a systematic and a consistent investment plan. This shows an example of a 22-year-old that started saving in his or her retirement account, put in 6% of their paycheck in there, and the employer matched it. And just by making that 6% contribution year over year, they were able to have almost $1 million ready at retirement. So you young adults out there, you're making purchase decisions between going out and buying shoes or going out and putting money in your retirement account. It's okay to buy the shoes as long as you funded the retirement account first. If you haven't funded the savings and the investments in the retirement account first, then maybe you delay the shoes. Or if you're like me, who's a sneakerhead on a budget, I go and buy whatever's on clearance, the last season's model at the outlet store. That way I can still satisfy my purchase appetite, but not spend all of my money and still allow it to be invested. Now, don't let the cost of major life events impact retirement goals. Life goes by us in the blink of an eye, and we have things that happen. We have family members that get sick. We have people that are laid off. We have cars that break down. We have educations to pay for. There's no shortage of things that are going to come into your life and require your financial resources in an effort to derail your financial well-being. So make sure you don't allow these major things to happen. One of the most common things is we oftentimes will stop our earning years to take care of others. Here's an example of this. Taylor was able to work continuously, did not have to take any time off, and was able to have an account balance of $1.3 million, taking a portion of Taylor's income, putting it into retirement and savings and investments. Jordan had to take some time off to care for a family member, care for an ill child. Took 7 years off, and that 7 year difference made a drop of about $400,000 of the portfolio. And then Sydney had to leave and become a caregiver and was not able to go back to work and actually had the portfolio dropped almost 70%. So what this tells us is that emergencies are going to happen, but have a plan in place to take care of them. And whenever possible, continue your savings goals so that your plan is not derailed. Because like we always hear, whenever we fly anywhere, put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help anybody else. The same thing matters. It's great to be able to take care of our loved ones. It's great to be able to take care of the people that are important to us, but we don't want to take care of them and then look up 20, 25, 30 years from now and didn't take care of ourselves. Another don't let lifestyle creep disrupt your saving strategy. Oftentimes, the second we get an available dollar, instead of earmarking a percentage of it to our savings to build our wealth, we just go out there and spend more. And retail therapy is real. We work hard, we're stressed out, so we want to go on a vacation. We want to have that nice meal. But then we get caught in this vicious cycle where we get a raise, we have more money, we spend more money, we run out of money. Now we have to work harder, getting a second or third job to potentially get a raise and keep this crazy cycle going. So if you go back to the budget phenomenon, 50, 30, 20, whenever a new dollar is available, we're not saying you can't enjoy any of it. Just make sure only about 30 cents of that dollar is going to lifestyle enjoyment. And then at least 20 cents of every dollar is going to savings so that lifestyle creep does not disrupt your financial plan. Now, another do, when it comes to investing, invest for the long term and have a disciplined plan to help you reach your goals. We're hearing the media, we're watching the news, we have social media, we have all these different apps that are just digesting news to us on a minute by minute basis. And we're making a lot of emotional decisions based on information that doesn't apply. However, one of the most prevalent ones is that when you hear market news, oh, the Dow had its worst day in 3 days. The S&P 500 is booming. The best day it's had in 48 hours. You know, we hear this inflammatory news. We have to take a step back. And if we're going to look at building wealth, we want to keep a long-term perspective. Historically speaking, bull markets have beaten the bear markets and have driven long-term gains, but oftentimes individual investors miss out on this opportunity because of the panic of the news. If you look here, the average bull market has been up 140%, and the average duration was 4 years. Compare that to the average bear market, which has been down 31.4% over an average duration of 1 year. So that doesn't mean that when the good times are rolling, we just act like it's going to go on forever. But really what it tells us is that when we have these downtimes, reflect on it and say, is it temporary? Is it short term? Does it affect me directly? Am I diversified? But don't make rash reactions based on the news you're hearing. That being said, don't let your irrational and emotional biases cloud your long-term investment plan. You know, we have a small percentage of pleasure that we get, and then the rest of the time we see loss from pain. And it creates these behavioral finance phenomenon that we don't even realize are happening, oftentimes happening at a subconscious level. So I want to talk a little bit about each of these. For example, how our minds work. Our minds tell us familiarity. What does that mean? When building our wealth, we stick with what we know. I think about my family and friends and clients who do not use credit cards because they grew up at a time when they were taught to use cash for everything. That's familiarity. However, they're missing out on the opportunity to travel the world on points, right? And that happens with our investments. We invest in companies we've always known, even if those companies are not still the best ones to be investing in. Or anchoring, making decisions on just one piece of information, one soundbite, one clip, and then we go all in without doing further research. Oversimplification speaks for itself, but I think one of the most dangerous ones is hindsight. And that's when we make a rash decision based on familiarity, anchoring, or oversimplification, and it works out well. So we reflectively look at ourselves as investment geniuses and investment gurus, and now we make every decision on a whim because we didn't miss. Or you make a decision and it doesn't work out, and then you say, oh, I'm just a bad investor, so you don't get back into the market. So this is how our brains like derail our ability to create generational wealth and build a legacy, is that we are fighting against an internal enemy right up here. If we remember that the brain's job is to conserve as much energy as possible and use as few calories per day, then it's going to try to derail us from you making decisions that we have to think about, that we have to research. And as long as you're aware of it, you can overcome it. And then how does the biases prevent our success? Well, a common one is the endowment effect. We typically value things that we own, and then we devalue things that we don't own. So if I look at my portfolio and I have a certain stock or a certain bond or mutual fund in there, I place a lot more priority and emphasis on that one because I own it versus somebody telling me I should diversify. And I'm like, that can't do as well. Or the status quo. It is what it is, right? It feels right, it feels good. And so why change anything? And then something we've seen a lot of over the last 5 years is the bandwagon effect. And that's when, everybody else is doing it, so should I. And we see that with varying investments that are coming out. A lot of the meme stocks during the pandemic period, a lot of the cryptocurrencies and NFTs and all of these alternative investments. We didn't research any of them. We just jumped into them because a celebrity told us we had to, or a best friend told us they made $1,000,000% return, and we jump on the bandwagon. And so this is how our wealth is derailed by not realizing that these very things are happening to us on a regular basis. So now we talk about getting ready for retirement. That doesn't mean you're 60, 65, 70. It could, but the reality is getting ready for retirement is when you're done playing around and you can actually see it in the forefront. So again, I'm at 15 to 20 years from retirement. So I have to start getting ready for it now. What does that look like? Well, we want to make sure our savings is sufficient. How much income are we going to need in retirement? What do we expect our expenses to be? That requires taking time to think about, where do you see yourself living? What do you see yourself doing? I love coffee. I love reading. In retirement, I could easily see myself sitting somewhere in Cuba or the Dominican Republic, working as a barista at a coffee shop and reading the rest of the afternoon. So how much would I need for that retirement? Now I got a specific goal that I'm planning for. Second one, how much longer should I work? What about Social Security? Should I retire early? Should I keep working till I get to full Social Security age? How about my health insurance? What is all that going to cost in retirement? And then what if I'm short on the goal? Now, once I identify the goal, I may find that I'm 3, 4, 5 years behind it. So what if I'm short on the goal? Do I work longer? Do I adjust my lifestyle and my income? Do I save more? These are things that we have to be considering and evaluating on a regular basis to decide if we're going to be ready for retirement. And maturity says you can change your mind, but you should always have a plan. So, for example, if you love what you do, you may say, hey, I don't see myself retiring from my business, but I want to have the choice to leave it if something else comes up. So let me plan to be in a position to retire at 60. Even though I love what I do and I can see myself doing it into 70, I want to have those options. Now, one of the crucial parts of this as we're getting ready for retirement is make sure you're revisiting these forms. And a big mistake that I see a lot of us make is not looking at and updating our beneficiaries. We got that job at 21, we signed up for the benefits, we completed the benefit packet, and we named our best friend's cousin's dog as our beneficiary because we're single, we have no children, we have no immediate relatives. And then that stays the same for 40 years. We pass away, we retire, we've been married, got 4 kids, and the beneficiary was still our neighbor's cousin's best friend's dog. And that's a legal document. So there's not much you can do to change that. So make sure if you're looking at any financial asset you have, regularly revisit who is the direct beneficiary for this. And an often overlooked one is our basic checking and savings accounts. For many of us, our wealth is in the bank, and we don't set up our accounts to where they have a TOD or POD on them. And that's an acronym for transfer on death or payable on death. So even with your basic bank accounts, make sure you have a designation that says if something happens to me before I'm able to use this, I want it to go to a certain person. And then common mistake is that these plans, the people we're listing are inconsistent with our overall estate plan. So you should be revisiting your estate plan regularly, revisit your beneficiaries regularly. We would all love to have a 95 or 100-year life expectancy, but things happen. And if something happened to you yesterday, would your family have the time to mourn in peace, or would there be chaos and turmoil because they don't know who's receiving anything or how the documents are titled? Now, when it comes to preparing for retirement and getting ready for retirement, do regularly assess your asset allocation. This is a very busy chart, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but what I wanted to say is that each of these color boxes represent a different investment category or an investment class. And what you notice is that if you go across from left to right, no one category or no one class is at the top the entire time. So it's important that wherever you are investing your money, you have a diverse portfolio that's fully allocated across all of the investment classes. Now, you're going to have certain accounts that are earmarked for specific goals. That account may only be invested in one class. If I'm going to buy a house in 2 years, or I'm going to put a down payment on a franchise in a year, I might keep it all in cash. I might keep it all in treasuries or CDs. I might keep it in one specific investment class. But when it comes to our long-term dollars, i.e. retirement, our 401k, IRA, 403bs, make sure you have good diversification of the investments you have in your portfolio. Now, plan for your life as a retiree. Remember, if I graduate from high school at 18, I finish college at 22, I start my career and I work to the typical retirement age of 65, I'm spending 35 to 40 years in working mode. Now, at 65, 90 to 95 life expectancy, I'm going to spend almost 30 plus years in retirement. So the money that I save, the wealth that I save and accumulate is going to have to last almost as long as it took me to accumulate it. So there are some things you got to be mindful of when it comes to that planning of your legacy and your wealth. Number one, pay attention to the taxes. Number two, where do you plan on spending this money? Where do you plan on living? Number three, how are you going to use it? What are some of the biggest derailers of retirement, i.e. health insurance, long-term care? And then lastly, what will you do during retirement? Will you still work part-time? Will you travel? Will you stay home and lower your expenses? You have to be thinking about all of these as part of this planning process. Now, don't forget about taxes. And this is important because the tax strategy you prepare for retirement has to start in the beginning of the planning process, not once you get to retirement. So if you look at these two columns, column on the left represents a traditional or typical retirement plan that has all of the retirement assets in a 401k, a traditional IRA, and a pension. Now, typically speaking, 100% of that portfolio is going to be taxable when you take the money out. What I mean by that, if I need $50,000 out of my portfolio A and it's all taxable, I'm going to need to take 60, 65,000 potentially out to have 50 in my hand because I got to pay federal, state taxes depending upon where you're living, versus having a diversified portfolio that has some tax-free, some tax-deferred, some already taxed. So you want to make sure that when you're building your retirement plan and you're building your wealth strategy, don't limit yourself just to one bucket of accumulation. Make sure that wherever you're putting your dollars, you're giving yourself the best chance to have diversification of the taxation of your dollars. Use an example two. I need that same $50,000 of income. This year, I may take all of it out of my Roth IRA and only have to take out 50,000 because I'm of the age of 59 and a half and it's not taxable. Using that just as an example. Now, one of the biggest threats to retirement is healthcare. And so do not underestimate the cost of healthcare and retirement. long-term care, custodial care, nursing homes, prescription drugs, eye exams, dentures, hearing aids. Many of these things are not covered by our traditional health insurance or Medicare if we're at the age where we receive it. And so you have to make sure you plan accordingly for those outliers as part of your retirement plan. And I just want to leave this up quickly. If any of you are at the age of 65 or nearing 65, make sure you understand the Medicare rules as far as enrollment comes, because you don't want to miss an opportunity to enroll if you're eligible to, nor do you want to enroll prematurely if you don't need it. So screenshot these dates, earmark them if you're close to 65. If you're not, just make a mental note to revisit this as you're getting closer to 65 so you're not blindsided by it. And then living in retirement, enjoying what you've built. A big component of retirement plan is to make sure you have an income strategy. And when I say an income strategy, the first chart showed diversification of taxation. This is saying, where are we taking the money from? So make sure you have a strategy that's going to support your withdrawal rates, as we call it in the financial services world. And what does that mean? That simply means if I got a bucket of money that I need to live on for the next 35 years, how much of it can I take out each year to make sure I don't run out? And depending upon how my portfolio is invested, it's going to tell me the percentage chance of me not running out of money. So make sure I'm looking at my income strategy on a regular basis and making adjustments to it as needed. And then those who are of the age of 62 or higher, a big decision you have to make is Social Security. And so consider when to start taking Social Security. We're often told, do not take it early because you're penalized. Do not take it early because you're penalized. And this chart does show if you take Social Security early, the bottom shows the age, the top shows the percentage of decrease of income. That, i.e., is a penalty. But just because you're going to have a decrease in the income does not mean it's not the right decision for you. As you work with your planner, they'll say, hey, what's longevity in your family? And if everybody in your family lives to be 72, 75, taking Social Security at 62 could be beneficial to you. Or you may say, hey, everybody in my family lives to be 135, but we stop doing things around 75 or 80. So I want to enjoy the money now, and then I don't care if I have less later. Now, if you don't have other assets, if you don't have other savings vehicles, if you don't have a business, if you're not expecting to receive any portion of the $68 trillion that are going to pass the hands in the next 25 years, then you may say, hey, let me have investments and savings in place to delay the day that I got to take Social Security. That way I can maximize how much income I'm going to get from it. And here's the reason why. At age 62, on average, Social Security benefits, only 59% of the benefits are covered by the amount of the money the person receives in Social Security. For most people that are taking Social Security, if they wait to the full retirement age, up to 81% of their monthly expenses can be covered by their Social Security benefit. And for those who wait to age 70 to claim it, on average, can have all of their expenses covered. Now, clearly, if you bought a new home, a new car every year, it wouldn't cover those expenses. But we look at the average cost of living in America based on the average benefit that's coming in. And that's what this is showing us here. So lastly, with the Social Security topic, questions to consider before applying for Social Security. If you're single and you have an average life expectancy, take it as soon as possible. Get the money in hands. If you have a long life expectancy, then let it continue to grow as long as possible before you take it. And then if you're married, you have a different set of decisions to make. Possibly the spouse with the lower benefit begins as soon as possible, and the spouse with the higher benefit delays until it's there, and then it becomes a bridge to draw that income in during those years. Now, as we wrap up here, some last few things to think about. Don't outlive your savings. We forget longevity is real. And as medical technology changes and health improves, we are living longer and longer. And so right now, as of 2024, 1 out of 3 65-year-olds will live to the age of 90. 1 out of 7 will live to the age of 95. And a married couple age 65 has a 50% chance that at least one of the two will live beyond age 90. So let's make sure we're planning for that longevity, because from a legacy standpoint and a wealth building standpoint, we don't want to work for 60, 70, 80 years only to end up as a burden to those that we've worked so hard to take care of and protect. Now they're forced to care for us. We want to be in a position where in our later years, if we're spending time with our family, It's because we enjoy spending time with our family, not because it's a necessity to spend time with them. One of the things about that is long-term care, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do want to say oftentimes the misconception is that long-term care is for old age. And the reality is, statistically speaking, the majority of people who are receiving long-term care benefits are under the age of 65. So if you are waiting to get long-term care, do not, because long-term care, if you see here, the average cost is $5,000 per month. The average duration is 3 years. That means if you are average, you're going to spend almost $200,000 of your wealth just providing for your care. And in my scenario, if I spend $200,000 of my wealth providing for that care, then that means my family will have $200,000 less to spend. Now, just on a personal note, this is where time matters. I got my long-term care policy when I was 26, and I pay less than $800 per month for that policy. I quoted a client who's my age now, and that client's premium was $8,600 per year for the same policy. The difference between getting it at 26 versus 50. So don't wait for this one. And then lastly, leaving a legacy. Leave your house in order. Reflect on your values and consider the family dynamics. Create a family financial map to say who's who's going to need help. Will you need to help a parent first? Will you need to help a sibling first? Is there a special needs child that's going to need to be elevated on the chart to help? Look at where the need is going to go, and then who are the people that are going to be part of the process to provide that care. So that way you can work it into your legacy planning and you can work it into your wealth plan. So, using the example we had in the beginning, no one is blindsided by caring for somebody else and having to take that time out of their accumulation phase. So when it comes to legacy, don't leave a mess for your heirs. Make sure your legal documents are updated. That's your will, your trust, your healthcare directive, your power of attorney. Make sure they're updated, make sure they're notarized, make sure they're witnessed to remove any conflicts there. Financials, make sure you have a location or access to all financial records. Your family should know who are the financial professionals you work with, your CPA, lawyer, financial advisors. They should have access to phone numbers and the documents for those individuals. And then what are the resources you have to pay for care? We talked about healthcare. What do you have medical insurance? What are your housing arrangements as you age? What are your burial instructions? And then almost most importantly, the values. What is it that you want to leave? What is the legacy you want to leave to your family? Leaving the physical dollars are great, but those are just a tool to live out the values that you've imparted in them. So what are the money values you want to share with your family? What is the purpose of the money and the wealth? What are the charities and the organizations that you want to use from a philanthropic standpoint to make sure that you can keep that legacy going for you? So whenever you have an opportunity, ask an expert. CHIP is a phenomenal resource. You log into the CHIP site. They will help you find an advisor that's close to you or an advisor that shares your affinity and your interest. So definitely take advantage of CHIP and Black Wall Street and all the resources that are available to you to find that expert. But when you find the expert, discuss the strategies that work best for you to achieve your goals. Find an expert that's going to help guide you, and find someone that's going to hold you accountable to the financial goals you create. Because that's where we get in trouble, is we get to the place of we know it all, and then we stop having somebody that's sitting on our shoulders saying, do you really need to buy that boat? Should you really take that trip right now? So speaking of people that are in your corner, if you have any questions for me, here are the ways you can reach out to me. My office phone number right there. That number is also textable for you young, savvy Gen Zs, or you can call in to speak to our receptionist, email, website, and then the QR code. So if you want to connect with us on social, there's Instagram, Facebook. Don't have a TikTok yet. I'm probably going to go my entire life without one. I downloaded the app just because I thought we would never have it again, but I refused to sign up for it. And then LinkedIn right in the middle. So that being said, thank you for this opportunity to share with you today. And now, Dana, I believe we want to open it up to any questions.
Absolutely. I'm both
Yeah.
like now laughing at that last statement about TikTok and also mildly crying because I looked out the window and realized there's some snow. Something that I'm just tired of. So for all my East Coasters. But Nathan, this was absolutely incredible information. And yes, I'm about to, hit you with some questions, a few I have on my little fun sticky notes here. As you were talking, I think would be very helpful for everyone on here. But first question is from someone who says that they're focused on building wealth for their family. They just, purchased or paid off their second home and in trying to kind of maintain their wealth, what are some other options or avenues that they can take now that they seem like they're in a comfortable spot to do more things financially? So if you're kind of
Yeah,
at that peak place, what else can you do outside of that?
yeah. So one of my favorite strategies, and it's what would be considered non-traditional, is that I'm a big fan of reduction of liabilities. So if you're at the place where you've accumulated assets, these assets are working for you, then what can you pay down to reduce the amount of monthly obligations out of your cash flow? Because if you play that game, then the less you have per month to dole out to keep the lights on and the roof over your head, the more you have to look for opportunities in what I would consider non-traditional investments, i.e., businesses, franchise, putting your money to work by lending it to others, putting your money to work by investing in properties with others. Like my little brother, trying to convince him to buy a quadplex because he can get a FHA loan and live in it and have some rental property. Well, he doesn't have the resources. Well, I might come in and help underwrite and support that. So that's what you do is you get yourself in a position to free up the cash flow for other opportunities. And if you have done well, like buying a property, then look for a chance to buy a second one and a third one and keep going with what's working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of different alternatives, even art, becoming maybe an angel investor, right? There's so many things that you can do once you get to that point. On the flip side of that, if you have become recently unemployed, what are some things that you, number one, should be thinking about in this moment and just making sure that you still have access to, and how should you kind of set up those next stages of this new life that you're getting ready to enter?
Yeah. There's three things I say do. First of all, do an immediate audit of your budget and expenses because quickly the needs column it gets divided into needs, wants, and wishes. And so if you're unemployed, if you're gainfully employed and your needs are, I got to have a house and a car, and then you lose your employment, now your need may still be, I need a house and a car, but you downsize to a smaller house, or you sell your car and you buy a car free and clear with cash. So immediately audit your current expenses and your current budget to see where you can cut. Look for upcoming expenses that you may have had covered through your employer that are no longer going to be covered. So you don't want to be blindsided by new expenses, i.e., Cobra and health insurance, or if you had insurance that was being subsidized and now you got to pay for it. So do an audit of expenses that may be coming forward. And then number three, do an audit of available benefits and resources. And one thing I tell people is that and if I can say it this way, people of color, we have a stigma with using public benefits and public assistance, but we pay into it for years and years and years with our tax dollars. Well, if you're unemployed, that's an opportunity for you to go back to say, what are some of these benefits I've been paying into, and how can I use them to get me back in a position? So I just kind of say, put pride aside and take advantage of any public assistance benefits that can help you bridge the financial gap between unemployment back to gainful employment.
Thank you. And this also might
Yeah.
be digging a little into the weeds too, in that same vein of that conversation, but someone brought up about that being a good time to explore a Roth IRA conversion. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I mean, just so people can know, the idea behind a Roth IRA conversion simply says that if you remember that chart I showed you with the two tax pie graphs, if all of your assets are in pre-tax buckets that you're going to have to pay taxes on later, then that would be a time to consider doing a Roth conversion where you take some of those pre-tax dollars, you take them out, you convert them to after-tax dollars. And the reason that question is brought up, that might be a good time, is because the money you take out is looked at as taxable income. So if it's not being layered on to additional income, you might be in a lower tax bracket at that window of unemployment to where you can make that change and it doesn't cost you as much. So it would be something to consider. The first question would be, do you need to? And then if you need to, then strategically how much to consider. And then one asterisk is that people often forget that you have to pay taxes on that conversion. And if the taxes are coming out of the account itself, then you're going to pay taxes on the taxes. So make sure that if you do the conversion, you have the resources to pay the taxes separately, or you convert enough to also cover the taxation of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like with a lot of the conversions and even just looking at different accounts, there's always like not one simplified answer or one thing that we kind of, to your point, jumping out and doing something and not
Yeah,
realizing also other things that kind of come with that. So with that being said, definitely consult your tax professional and your
yeah.
advisor to ensure you're in step and doing it the right way. How can someone really maximize their returns or their savings? You know, what can they really start to look at to really maximize that, right? They're, investing in their 401ks, you have, maybe your savings set up and all these different things, but what else seems like might be out there to be helpful, especially in this economic environment?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the first things I say is that you have to realize what your risk tolerance is. How much risk can you accept? And when we don't look at a long-term picture, we think we're not willing to take the risk. And if you think about a ladder, climbing the rungs of a ladder, the lower you are on the ladder, if you fall off, you're going to be okay. That's your checking and savings account. You go up a couple of bits, that's your CDs, your T-bills. But you get to the top of the ladder, if you fall off of that, it could hurt. Well, that's what it is with some of our investments. And so we miss the opportunity to get better returns because we're not willing to climb up the ladder. What I tell people, though, is that if you don't need the funds right away, you don't need them in the next 3, 5, 10 years, you have the ability to recover from whatever happens when you fall up that ladder. So when people want to get a better return or more favorable return, first identify how long you can go without touching those dollars, and then see where the opportunities are. And I will say there's no shortage of them, but that's where working with an advisor is going to be important because he or she will help you identify the investment opportunities that are within your risk level, but also within your opportunity to have access to. Some of the more, I don't want to say better performing, but some of the more appreciative assets have restrictions as to who can be in them,
Mhm.
accredited investors. And so that's why it's important that the advisor helps you find something that makes sense for you.
Awesome. And I know I asked earlier, I had put a statement in there while you were talking about what financial joy meant to everyone, and everyone had, varying responses. But I know one person had mentioned being able to save and plan for their children, whether it's your children, nephews, is whoever in your life that you want to do well and get them a head start on that generational wealth. What are some things that people could be doing now to set those kids up for success, especially around wealth? And it's interesting too, because we're living in this non-traditional time.
Mhm.
We're thinking about what college used to mean and what it means now, and how people are gravitating towards, non-traditional futures.
Yeah, yeah. There's this phrase I love, and I wish I could remember who first said it because I can give them credit. But they said, do your giving while you're living, right? There's no better way to impact somebody than when you can tell them why you're impacting them. And so, looking for opportunities to make a difference in the loved ones around you is phenomenal as long as it doesn't impact your ability to take care of your immediate needs. One of my favorite tools, and this is not a recommendation, just like my personal favorite tools, is for my family. We used UTMA accounts, which is Uniform Transfer to Minor accounts. And what that simply is, it's a tool that allowed me to put money into investment accounts from my children that were owned by my children, but I had control over them or custody of the dollars until they were at the age of majority. So that allowed it to grow at a rate that was taxed at their income level, and they've been broke their whole life. They're still broke. They're in college, and so so essentially the account became tax free for them because they didn't have taxable income as it was growing, and as long as their proceeds were under what they needed to file their tax return, it was great. But it gave us the flexibility to use those proceeds for anything as well. So if they want to buy a house, that money can be used for a down payment for their home. If they want to go to college, it can be used for college. So it was just a tool that allowed maximum flexibility so they can then do whatever they want. Also, you want to gamify it. So if you're working with if you have a young kid in your life that you want to help out, maybe you help them do a matching challenge where, okay, if you do your chores and your allowances and you can find $100, I'll match it $100 and we'll put it into your investment account. So gamify the act of saving and investing to where they get excited about it. One of my clients, I work with 11 of their grandchildren. The youngest is 4, the oldest is 25. And each of the grandchildren get to pick what they want to invest in. And I help them find their strategy for them and they gamify the process to where it's fun for them also.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Really bringing the conversation forward, right? Well, how do we start to, put these little nuggets into everyone's vocabulary? So with that, from being as a couple, when you're either married or, what that situation looks like for you, how do you start to have those, what I would call more honest conversations, right? A lot of times we're coming into different relationships and we're,
Yep.
presenting different pieces of ourselves, but it's also important to present that financial piece honestly so that you have, better and more productive conversations up front as you head towards potentially, tying your life to that person. How does someone really navigate those conversations? And once you're potentially in that marriage and someone might be a saver or a spender, how do you really kind of deal with that from an investment perspective and just generating wealth in general?
Yeah.
That might seem
The,
tough.
the the first thing to do, which is the hardest thing to do, the first thing to do is to not take their spending or their investing habits personal, right? We all have a money mindset, but we all don't know why we have the money mindset. One of my biggest financial hangups was I bought a 3,500 square foot house when I was 28, right? Because growing up, we never owned a house. And so I wanted to experience what it was like to have a big house. And I bought a nice luxury car because we grew up sitting on the curb playing That's My Car as the cars would drive by, right? So my money mindset was in order to be out of the hood, these are the things I have to own. It wasn't like I wanted to be a spendthrift, right? So you have to understand where they're coming from and what their money mindset is. But secondly, you want to be on the same page. And going back to that needs, wants, and wishes example, you sit down with the budget and each of you simply say, here's what I think are our needs, here's what I think are our wants, and here's what I think are our wishes. And then find out where you're aligned because you may be aligned in more places than not and only have a handful that are not aligned. And I'll give a perfect example, a personal example. I love pedicures. Don't judge me. I have
No,
no
not
better, no,
judge.
no.
It's a part of
Yeah,
hygiene, okay?
it is,
It's a part of basic hygiene
it
for
is.
everyone.
I sit in there with my Audible book and I sit in there with my cell phone trying to use Google Translate to hear what they're talking about my toes. But like if money is tight, I can go a month or two without a pedicure. I can clip my own nails, right? But my wife, for example, has a hangnail that's extremely painful. And so she has to have a pedicure every single
She's gonna
month.
be mad at you for sharing that with
Oh,
everybody.
I've shared this 1,000 times, so she's over the mat. But I say that because like every month when it comes time to paying bills, if I see pedicure on there, I can't get upset because I know it's a need for her. Or if I'm the construction worker that's working 80 hours a week outdoors and I needed to sit down and veg out in my lazy boy and watch cable TV and I want to spend $150 per month on cable, it's a need for me. So do that needs, wants, wishes audit to see, first of all, of the expenses we have coming in, which ones do we agree on? And then the ones that we disagree on, we're probably not that far off. And then some couples just literally have to split their bank accounts and split their expenses. But for the majority of people, if you come into it with the idea that it's not personal, everybody has a different money mindset, let's see where we're united first. Then you can work with the professional that can help you bridge the remaining gap there. Because there's no better wealth journey than a united wealth journey, even if that means you roll your eyes because that person wants to spend money. And again, using my wife as an example, she's going to derail our budget by the death of 1,000 cuts. I'm going to derail our budget by the miscellaneous expensive purchases. We both have the ability to derail it, but if I look at the statement, there's 35 transactions from her, $1.50, $4, $17. There's 3 transactions from me, 1,300, 2,200. Who's at fault?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Very
just
fair
remember that.
point.
Yeah.
I feel like what I also took away from that was just honoring everyone's joy, right? And bringing that
Yeah.
to the financial conversation as opposed to the opposite of not doing that and then also not accounting for it as well. So quick and, last question. I know we're coming up on time, but it seems like everyone's hanging in there with us because they're enjoying the gems you're dropping. To kind of focus more on business owners, right? There's a lot going on in the world in general, especially when it comes to business and how people are being affected by the economics of things. What can business owners do to really maximize, their wants and needs from a wealth perspective, especially those who are no longer tied to these larger corporate companies where you kind of have that that hovering over you, right? You have access to your 401k, you have all these different benefits. But as a founder, sometimes it's hard to activate that or reactivate it again. What would be your
Mhm.
suggestion to those business owners and other founders?
Yeah, so for that demographic specifically is a couple of things. One, have an ally or a partner in your corner that's going to tell you the truth about your business expenses and so forth, because our business is our baby and we rarely see it through a lens that's not biased, right? And so there's times where we're hiring people that we shouldn't hire yet because we want to expand the business versus we probably should be letting people go. There's times that we finance things because we want new equipment and we probably could have leased and had it going. So you need someone that specializes in business efficiency to make sure that, and it's somebody you trust to make sure that they can counsel you to make the right decision so you can use your business as a tool. And when I say use your business as a tool, you realize that that is truly what it is. The second you become a business owner, you unlock a myriad of opportunities to plan from a tax standpoint, an efficiency standpoint, whether that's taking expenses you're paying, my cell phone bill, for example, I'm paying 100% of it out of my personal expense, but I'm 70% of it is being business calls. Well, let me take that bill under the business and have it deductible. My kids are working in the business, but they're not getting a check. Let me put them on payroll. So look at opportunities to leverage your business as the tool it is to see where there may be places that you can be more efficient with the resources. But part of that challenge of a business owner is what is the exit strategy of the business as well? Because you got to plan for the business for your exit, whether that is selling it, whether that's bringing another family member into it. The business is going to be a tool for you for your retirement. Then you got to have a plan as to how you're going to activate that tool. And if we take the approach that many of us take with our home, oh, I bought a nicer home so I can build the equity for retirement. And then we get to retirement and we realize we can't sell the home because we have no place to live, so we can't tap the equity. We do that same thing with our businesses. We build this business, but we don't have an exit strategy. So take the time to figure out what is your exit plan and then start putting the pieces in place to make it happen over the time frame that makes the most sense for you.
Awesome. I think that was
So,
extremely helpful. And I got a lot of things out of there that we don't even have time to dive into. But again, we will absolutely be coming back with more of these financial series to dive even deeper in a lot of these topics. And before we officially close out, I would ask, like, what are maybe 3 quick tips that people could do right now, literally as soon as they hop off this call?
yeah. So number one, do an audit of your budget. I mean, there's a lot of phenomenal apps that can plug it all in, but just do an audit of your budget and know what's coming in, what's going out. Number two, take some time, unplug, and do some daydreaming to say, what does your financial future look like? What is your why? So that way, when you're sacrificing putting the money away, you don't look at it as a sacrifice. You look at it as you're investing in that future. And then number three, and the most important, find somebody to be in the trenches with you, an accountability partner. It's a whole lot better to plan your financial future when you have someone that's your peer that's doing it at the same time. Because even me as the professional, I don't have the same impact as your best friend that's like, go, best friend, we can do this. Let's delay this trip one more year so we can save more in our Roth IRA. So find somebody that's similar to you, similar place in life, similar demographics, and ask them to join you on the journey so you actually have someone to talk to about on those successful days and those quiet nights.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great place to end. I again appreciate you for being here, dropping these gems. Thank you all for hanging in and hanging out with us this afternoon. I know there's a lot of things you probably have on your mind and your plate to do, but totally happy that you were able to be with us through this session. And again, keep up to date with Nathan, us over at Chip. We'll be sending out some great offers for you all who did participate in the call today to get access to our financial coaching that we launched and also find access to more financial professionals like Nathan. Mandy, thank you for this partnership. Really excited to ensure that everyone is able to continue to build wealth. Have a wonderful and safe rest of your afternoon.
Thank you very much. Stay warm out there, Dana.